Hello and welcome to the channel. I'm Steve-O. I'm a self-taught front-end software engineer who managed to go from having no coding experience at all to getting their first role within tech within a year. In my last video, which I put out a week or so ago, if you haven't seen it, which you probably haven't, you should go watch it. But in that video I go over the steps I took to getting my first role in the tech industry. But in this video I'm going to go into a bit more detail about how I even got into coding and how you yourself might go about getting started and doing the same. So back in high school, I wouldn't say I was a particularly techie kid. I was much more of the creative type, loved music. In fact, that's all I wanted to do was to play and write music. That was my one thing I loved more than anything. I still do, but purely as a hobby at this point. More so listening to it, I would say. But ultimately, that is what I would end up pursuing, and my degree is in music as a result of that. But in my first few years of high school, I remember getting a little bit of a taste of programming, using Scratch, which is like a children's programming language essentially, and we made like a little sort of silly game with that, and I remember really enjoying it at the time. I didn't really think much past that. It was a fun experience at the time, and then I kind of just forgot about it. It lay in the back of my mind, but at the time music was on my mind, so I pursued that. However, as you can imagine, I didn't get very far with that. Tried to write film music, I tried private tuition, I tried playing in cover bands and for paid gigs and things. None of that worked for me. There was no career there for me. I know some people do make a living from music, but it is very difficult to make any sort of livable income from it at all. And ultimately, it just didn't work out for me. Not to mention, I wasn't the most talented musician either. But besides the point, it's a really difficult field to try and make any sort of money in. So it didn't work out. So for the next few years, I actually became a bus driver after that, which eventually a tour bus driver as well. I steered myself towards that just due to close family being involved in that industry, essentially. That and the fact I quite like driving things. I have a bit of an interest in driving and things as well, in cars and stuff. So I thought that's kind of an easy thing to gravitate towards for me and try out. So I figured it made sense at the time. At least it would keep me going for a few years at least, and I would see where things would go from there. Fast forward to 2020, I was working for a tour company based in Edinburgh, Scotland, and COVID hit that year, obviously, and then we were all laid off. Anyone that hadn't been sort of working there for 2+ years, we were left without a job after that, and well, it was back to the figurative career drawing board for me. In the months leading up to being laid off, I'd actually been looking for work. I kind of mentioned this before, if you have seen the other video. Mostly in sales, or looking for work in sales and customer service roles and things like that to get by, but no luck, at least up until that point. The silver lining though is now that I was unemployed, I had lots of time to figure out what I really wanted to do now. So I touched on this, like I said, a little bit, but just in case you haven't watched it, sort of the context as to where I found the time, I guess. I realise that most people are sort of working full-time jobs and things and want to make a career switch, which does make it more difficult to get into this sort of stuff. So I feel like I need to give some sort of background as to like my situation when I did get into this stuff. But anyway, moving on. It was here that I remembered my fondness for programming back in high school, the small amount of exposure I had to it when I was there. I remembered that, and now that I had the time, I finally dove into what would eventually end up being my new career path. Didn't know it at the time, but ultimately that's where I ended up. So yeah, I started to learn the fundamentals of programming, and the first thing I did was jump into Python. Obviously loved it personally. Was hooked on it, and I realised from that point onwards that was what I wanted to do. It clicked pretty quickly. for me. Not in terms of knowing it and learning it, but more so being interested and fascinated by it. It definitely takes a lot longer than a few weeks to learn programming, but I knew within a few weeks that it was for me. I would say Python is a good choice, mainly because when you're first starting out, you don't necessarily know what you want to do as such, because, well, you don't know what there is, you don't know what options there are out there for things to do. One of the easiest sort of ways of getting your foot in the door with programming is to learn web development. It's the most sought after thing, really, especially as a self-taught developer as well. It's quite easy to get into. It is one of the easier fields, and it is in high demand. So a lot of people just dive into JavaScript and things like that, which is also pretty versatile these days as well, to be fair. But ultimately, it was built for the web. It was built as a web development language, because web browsers and things all run on JavaScript. Python, though, the reason I went for Python is because, as I said, it is more of an all-round thing. It is reasonably good at doing anything that you want it to do, basically. And it's very easy to understand. The syntax is sort of famously easy to understand as a beginner. It's very minimal and reads almost like just English, essentially. It just reads. It's pretty easy to read. There's not a lot of sort of weird symbols and things you don't recognize going on. It is quite easy to read, I would say. So that's sort of the reason I went for it. But yeah, if you aren't sure what you want to do, I would recommend either Python or JavaScript, to be honest. It really just depends, but both are good choices. I personally went for Python. So yeah, it's a solid choice given versatility and things like that. So that's all there was to it, really. I jumped into that. I learned sort of the fundamentals, kind of, within a couple of months. I just kind of started playing around with it and sort of getting used to that. And then once I knew that that's what I wanted to do, that's when I jumped into a coding bootcamp and sort of started taking it seriously. For the next sort of 4 months after that, I would then learn web development specifically, with HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and a bit of Java and Ruby and stuff like that as well. Building projects in sort of like an agile, a sort of pseudo-agile environment, and getting my first little bit of experience, and then eventually that would lead to a job, obviously, sort of within the next few months after that. But yeah, that is how I got into coding, basically. So there's a lot of hopping around at the start. I was doing random things beforehand. I was all over the place with my career, but it just kind of goes to show that you don't really need a traditional background as such. You can jump into coding wherever you want, really. If you think it's too late or anything like that, it's probably not. Maybe even age-wise, if you're quite, if you're not maybe as young as like your 20s anymore, if you're getting maybe towards your 40s, for example, I think you're getting a bit too old for it. Ageism and stuff like that in the industry is it's a common topic, I guess. I will just say that I've met a couple people doing the same thing as me, the whole self-taught route, switching careers and things. There was a couple people I knew that were 40 plus who managed to do it. And not only did they manage to do it, but they're actually quite good developers. So, yeah, probably not too late. I'd say maybe if you're already retired or something, then maybe don't expect to jump back into a career in tech or something, but you can still do it as a hobby, perhaps. I'd certainly say at least to learn coding, where if it's for a job or not, you can do it at any age, basically, because it ranges from web development being at its basic level quite simple once you get your head around the basic concepts, to extremely complicated things, like building game engines, or machine learning and AI and stuff like that. It can get incredibly complicated as well. It just depends on how far you want to go with it. So yeah, that's my story anyway. That's how I got into coding and web development and things. If you enjoyed hearing my story and you want to hear more from me, then please like, subscribe, do an engagement, do the YouTube engagement stuff. Leave a comment if you've got any questions for me, or for if you just want to have a discussion, just leave a comment. But yeah, that's it for this one. Bye for now.